By the time this video comes out, Amazon's The Boys will be wrapping up its final season. And say what you want about the final season, whether you liked it or not, from an objective point of view, they fumbled the bag. What was seemingly supposed to be one of the easiest layups in TV show history ended up being a masterclass in bad writing, horrible production decisions, budget cuts, and forgetting your own lore. But that got me thinking. Over the years, there have been a ton of shows that have had all the momentum in the world going into their final seasons, but then somehow just dropped the ball right at the end. You would think with millions of dollars in budget and hundreds and sometimes even thousands of people working on each episode, that someone would just go ahead and say, hey man, this blows. Major spoiler warning for everything I'm talking about. I'll put a list up here. But to understand what makes a bad ending, we do have to understand what makes a good ending. To make a good ending, you have to stick with the established lore and the world that you built, remember what your character's motivations are that you have established in the previous seasons, and complete most if not all of your story arcs, whether that be death, living happily ever after, or what have you. To make a bad ending, do the opposite of that. If you compare the endings of Breaking Bad to, let's say, Umbrella Academy. In Breaking Bad, although Walter White's motivations do change throughout the show, especially in the final season, his arc that they made for him in season 5 did have a satisfying conclusion that lined up with the character's motivations, and the end result lined up with the actions that he took throughout that season. He went around tying up any loose ends that any other characters had that he had access to, and essentially went out on his own volition, which is a good ending. You tied up every knot that you set in your story for the most part. Now, if you look at Umbrella Academy, they literally dropped whole storylines between season 3 and 4. They halved the length of the season, they forgot all their character motivations, and tried to end the show with a sacrifice which was not warranted. Their motivations didn't line up and it wasn't satisfying. You need to earn your endings, and for them to just come to a conclusion within a few lines of dialogue and go through with it and thrusting this horrendous decision upon the viewers is just bad. They literally went, here bitch, damn. I don't know the true inner workings of how even a single episode of TV is made. Not a lot of people in this world do. But we as an audience have constantly been subjected to shows and their complete inability to end their shows with any sort of dignity, tarnishing any sort of legacy these shows could have had. Oh hey, here's a photo of Stranger Things.
I've seen Stranger Things.
Stranger Things was the biggest disaster in modern TV history, and I wish I was exaggerating. The last season was so detached from the previous 4 seasons that fans went full schizo mode and started making up theories that there's actually a secret last episode that the Duffers have not released, giving the Duffers way too much credit than they deserve, honestly.
Well, yeah, we're not gonna shit the bed at the end.
If they were able to pull this off, this would have been one of the most insane things in TV history and would have cemented them as the best writers and showrunners in the world. And at some point, even I started believing in this theory because there were some signs, honestly. That was until I realized that the Duffers just actually aren't smart enough to pull something like that off.
This is a ton of people. We probably should have killed some of you off.
After decimating any sort of legacy that Stranger Things could have had after its ending, the Duffer Brothers went on a media tour competing against each other to see who could spew out the most garbage to all these media outlets. Literally constantly one-upping each other in the amount of lies and BS that they were saying. And season 5 as a whole wasn't even all that bad. The season started out really good, honestly, and the ending of volume 1 ended up being one of the highest rated episodes in Stranger Things history. But past that, it really felt like they did not know what they were doing, and it literally was falling apart episode by episode. It's like when they sought out to finish up this show, they didn't even have a concept of how to end it. And that's not just speculation. If you watch the Netflix documentary, they literally admit to this.
We went into production without having a finished script for the finale.
They were writing the finale script while they were filming. Considering that they had multiple years to write the ending to this show, I don't know how the executives at Netflix let this through. And you know what's even worse? Stranger Things wasn't even supposed to be a 5-season long story. It was actually supposed to be an anthology ending the story of 11 at season 1. So for them to go out and say they always had the final 40 minutes of this show planned out is actually just lies. Netflix allegedly forced them to extend the show past the first season, which was working in their favor for at least 4 seasons. Right up until the end moments. After years of hype between season 4 and 5, there was probably a lot of pressure on the Duffers to finish up the story in a satisfactory way. I can dog on the Duffer Brothers for hours, but can you imagine the amount of pressure they were in trying to write the ending to literally the biggest show on TV at the time? So much pressure that they turned it from an actual horror show to a Marvel CGI fest. Okay, I'm sorry. There are a lot of reasons why shows are just not able to stick their landings anymore. Sometimes it's the network calling the wrong shots, leading to the showrunners trying to work around those issues. Or sometimes it's the writers themselves forgetting their own show that they wrote. Or even when a show just goes on for too long. Not to constantly talk about Stranger Things, but Netflix gave the Duffers more than enough time to finish off the show, so it was definitely not network interference in this one. But it was definitely the world's biggest procrastination session budgeted by Netflix. They probably saw they had a month left to submit the script and went, ChatGPT, hypothetically, how would you end Stranger Things? Okay, enough about Stranger Things. Why don't we take The Boys for example? I'm recording this video before the finale has aired, so there's a chance that it could actually be peak. But if the season leading up to it is any sort of clue as what the finale could be, it's clear that the show has been lobotomized in order to fulfill their cinematic universe desires with Vought Rising and The Boys Mexico. I was right. Which, mind you, these type of ongoing cinematic universes were the biggest punching bag of The Boys originally. They used to make fun of this exact thing. They literally had a whole episode in season 4 dedicated to making fun of Marvel phases. And they ended up bastardizing and flanderizing their own show to build their own universe. You wanna know a fun fact? Guess who produced this TV show? Sony Pictures. What are the chances that the company that's been trying but failing to build one cinematic universe with the Spider-Verse stuff isn't going to do the same thing with this universe? Now, I don't have any proof yet that Sony is calling a lot of the shots and is the issue with The Boys yet, but it very well could be a factor into why The Boys is ending as it is. It's very clear that the final season of the show just doesn't even have the budget to even cover what they were doing in season 1, and it very well could be because they're using that budget to build 2 whole shows around this. And all of this is not to absolve Kripke and his issues with writing in the show. No matter how much studio interference there is, the studio can't interfere into the words you are writing. How are you forgetting pivotal plot points in the same season? And you don't throw away plot points you've been building for 4 seasons in the first 10 minutes of an episode. There's so much right with the season, but an overwhelming amount that is also wrong. Season 4 ended on so much of a high that this season is really such a letdown. But it just irks me how you had all this momentum and you somehow didn't make a 10 out of 10 season. You would think in the era of streaming, where our shows aren't tied to specific time slots and there aren't overheads of distribution like with previous network cable television, that writers and showrunners would finally be able to spread their wings and show us what they're all made of, and that they'd be able to flesh out their story arcs and conclude them when the show needs concluding. But apparently not. Even with multiple years between seasons, they keep dropping the ball, and that they're unable to satisfy a majority of their audience at all. But like I said, Stranger Things and The Boys are just the 2 most recent examples. Bad endings have been a phenomenon for all of TV, but it's been growing more and more as we progress to this modern streaming era. It's like recently when writers get to know that their show has to end and that it's been cancelled, as a big protest, they just write the most dog shit endings known to man and shove it to their audience's faces. But even in those circumstances, there are shows that are able to end on a high note. Take for example BoJack Horseman. The showrunners wanted that to run for a couple more seasons, but Netflix pulled the plug in season 6. But what they managed to get out in that single season is some of the best TV ever. And it wasn't even that the ending was complex or super nuanced and groundbreaking. They managed to write their characters to their natural end. end the story at a point where you understand that they will just keep living their lives. But it's like now more than ever, we are chasing this world where every ending has to be nuanced, and you always have to do something that fans don't expect. You have to subvert expectations, because if the fans don't expect your ending, apparently that's good and that makes your show unique in some sense. But if every show is doing this, then none of you are unique, right? If every show is ending at a point where fans want more, it's not a good ending, no matter how nuanced or unique or subverted it is. Like, let's take another Eric Kripke show, for example, Supernatural. I think it's really funny how that show ends. Even though Eric Kripke wasn't around to write the ending, it's so stupid how it ends. Essentially, they kill their version of God, and on the very next mission, Dean gets stabbed by a rusty nail and dies of tetanus. They were trying to imply that because God is not there to protect them, they lose all their plot armor. Was there really no other way they could have thought to end the show? How about sometimes we get a "and they all lived happily ever after" type of ending? But like I said, bad endings have always been a part of television. Stuff like How I Met Your Mother, That 70s Show, Pretty Little Liars, Dexter, all ended on some pretty sour notes. But if you look back on the era that they were made in, the writers for those shows had literally no time between seasons to even begin to flesh out their characters. If you remember back then, seasons would mean a yearly thing, meaning as long as a show was running, there would be essentially no downtime in production. So because of this, you can excuse some of their bad choices because of the time crunch they were under. Because at points, I bet they probably didn't have time to do focus testing or audience reviews or even review the material themselves. They would probably send their first drafts as finals. But even during this era, you had some really good television, like Game of Thrones. Yeah, Game of Thrones, a series that ended at 7 seasons. 7. So we've had shows ruined because of network interference, writers running out of steam, the shows going on for too long, and in some points running out of source material. But do you know the odd thing? Whenever a show is bombing its final season, if you look at the online discussions on Reddit or any other platform, fans are able to spitball together an ending that is infinitely better than whatever the writers are coming up with. Sometimes by a very significant margin, might I add. So that begs the question, if you are a writer on a show and you don't know how to end it, why not just take some fan advice? I'm not saying pick up a random Redditor who says he's a super fan and just put him in the writer's room. How about a little anonymous post on Reddit going like, how would you hypothetically end this show if you were the writer? And just pick the best ideas. I mean, this might be a very obtuse take, but like, if we're being unethical in this world anyways, why not just steal someone's ideas and you don't even have to give them credit? Like, if we look at Umbrella Academy, there were 2 problems. 1, why didn't they use the source material to end the show? And 2, if they did this stupid idea that I just had, they probably could have come up with a way better ending than whatever they did in season 4. It's like writers are sometimes just not fans of the shows that they are writing. And that is a valid take, because at some points you get tired of writing for the same material day in and day out. Trying to balance character arcs with overarching story arcs and trying to tie everything into a nice bow because they wrote themselves into a bunch of corners basically. But again, I might sound obtuse, but if you write a post on Reddit, some guy's gonna make up a better ending than you can probably think of. The more I'm saying this, the more I think I sound like a crazy person. But the writers did multiple strikes for valid reasons. But when people see their favorite shows disrupted for writer strikes, and then you come back and half the shows you're ending are ending badly, of course the public's gonna get upset. And eventually when they have to go on strike again because some AI bullshit, people just won't be into it that much. I'll admit, I don't watch much TV or movies anymore because it cuts into my hours of existential dread every day. However, when I hear that a show that I was watching is airing its final season, I do tend to watch it because I'd like to tie that knot in my brain and see how this show that I was watching concluded. But more and more, every time I hear that a show is ending, the first thought that comes into my mind is, how will they fuck it up this time. There's no one reason why a show ends badly, but I think when you put millions of dollars behind every project, there should be some form of accountability. It's one thing where you write an ending and you just miss the mark and the fans aren't satisfied, but it's another thing where you forget everything you wrote before and just end on some dog shit. If you end on a good note, your shows stand a test of time. Again, Breaking Bad. Can you believe that show came out in, what was it, 2008, 12, what? But when it ends, the word of mouth becomes so humongous that your show lives on another life. I would never tell anyone to watch Umbrella Academy because what's the point when the final season ends that badly? Also, why is it always these Netflix shows ending so badly? I didn't write an end for this script. I literally have the boys playing. If you like the video, drop a like, subscribe, join my Patreon for free. I drop all my outro songs over there, and feel free to support me if you would like. And thank you for watching. Get out of here.